What's up guys, it's Z here, welcome back. Today we're going to discuss about the ban list. In about a month from now we're going to have a new list, and I have a feeling that this time it's Konami's time to clean up the format just like they did back in 2019 with the internal format. And the reason being is because now we're just beginning of having major events again, which is really cool. And I think that with something big happening, it's Konami's doing for just making the entire format change to promote new product, make the game fresh again, and I think this is what they're going to try to do. So I think this ban list is going to be announced before the YCS Pasadena and YCS Utrecht, but obviously it's going to take effect the Monday after YCS Utrecht concludes, because Konami never changes the list right before a major event, because that would be too harsh for players to try to prepare for an event a couple days ago with a new ban list, because they won't have any deck, they might not know exactly what they're going to face, so they never do that. So don't expect this to become valid before the two YCSs, but after they conclude, then we're going to have a new game completely. So I'm going to do a lot of changes in this list, and I think that's what Konami wants to do as well. And of course, when a Banlist prediction has so many changes, it turns to be a little bit contradictory, but try to think before you criticize anything about this list that decks do not deserve to get hit. Think back when they cleared the eternal format, that they even hit decks that they weren't supposed to be that good back then, like when they banned Electromite and put Servant of Endymion to 1, when Pendulum was not even considered to be a tier 1 deck back then. So they just want to clear any tier 2 type of strategy as well, just because people won't resort to these weaker decks right now when everything else gets hit. So before we begin with the video, if you enjoyed, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming content, comment down below your thoughts about what the next ban list is going to be, and now let's get to the video. So let's start with the ban section. Now, I am not a big fan of banning archetype specific cards, so I'm going to keep this very short and ban only cards that are just seeing very generic play, and they're abused by a lot of decks. So the first one is Predaplant Vert Anaconda. Now, I think that most people are going to agree with this card. This card was not meant to get banned before Enforcer was released, but now that Enforcer is out, I think this card is actually ban worthy. With just Dragoon, it was fine, I think. Dragoon was not a card that a lot of the top tier decks were playing, maybe only Phantom Knights was using it, but now Enforcer has the ability to pretty much give you utility materials in the graveyard and a monster that is not just a disruption, but also it's very resilient and it has a utility when combined with other cards. So I think Verte is now a problem, and even with Verte banned, people are still going to play 3 Destiny Fusion, 1 Duster and 1 Celestial in some decks. So it's not like Konami would destroy their sales for Enforcer with Burst of Destiny when this card get banned. And of course, Burst of Destiny, by the time the ban list comes out, it's already going to be out for a long time, so people are already going to have bought everything they wanted. So I think it will be a good time for Verte to get banned. And it's not just for the cards we have right now, it's also for potential future releases, because an unhealthy card like this makes Konami think twice before making a monster like Enforcer. And since they don't really mind about making such monsters, we have to have this card banned in order for the game to be healthy going forward, for any good generic fusion monsters in order to be released, because with branded fusion coming out as well, this card is going to become even more busted, because you don't know what kind of Despia monsters we're going to have in the future, and now we have a card that fuses from Alvas from the deck, so we need to be prepared for stuff like this, and this is why Anaconda, I think, has to get banned sooner or later, and this is probably the time to do so. Now, the next card is Artifact Scythe. Now, this card is again a card that was not ban worthy before Enforcer's release, but with Enforcer, it's so easy to get access to this card with Dagda and also pop it with Enforcer, especially with Anaconda. But even if Anaconda gets banned, I think Scythe still has to get banned, because it's another card like Calamities, another card like the Buster Lock, and yes, Buster Lock is legal now, but without Union card, it's not that good anymore. So cards like this, Konami doesn't want in the game for too long, and I can understand that, because a card that doesn't let you play doesn't promote any interactivity, and this is one of those cards. And to be honest, this card has been in the game for far too long, and then have been other scenarios and other timelines where this card was considered bannable and Konami never did it, but now I think it's where it is most broken, because you don't even rely on Sanctum anymore. When you were relying on activating Sanctum, you were using Trap Trick, and that was basically a card you need to hard draw. But with Anaconda and Dagda, you don't need to hard draw anything. Even drawing this card anymore is not a brick, because that means that you just don't need to go in Dagda. You set it, you summon your Enforcer, you pop it during your opponent's turn along with one of their own cards, and then you lock them out of the extra deck. So I don't see a reason for this card to still be in the game. And artifact decks, yes, if anyone's playing artifacts these days, yes, that would hurt, but sometimes cards like these need to get hit in order for the game to prosper moving forward. And the last card is very similar to both of the above, and I think that a lot of people have been complaining lately about this card, and I can see why, and this is Imperial Order. Now, Imperial Order, even though it has an errata, I think it's going to end up becoming the first errata card that is going to join the ban list once again. And the reason being is a card that, in a format where there's a lot of variety, in a format where you don't rely on too many monsters or too many traps for the top decks to win, like for example when we're playing with Adamancipators, this card was not not that great because the Emancipators didn't use that many spell cards, but now we're using too many spells in too many decks, and this card is an auto-win button against a lot of decks. It doesn't even matter if you yourself are playing spell cards. You can see this as a Vanity's Emptiness type of card. Your decks were special summoning, but you just made your board, you set your emptiness, you activated it, and it was over. It's the same with Imperial Order. You activate all your spell cards, you do your combos, you make your thing, you set this, you activate it, and your opponent loses. Unless you're playing against stuff like Altgeist or something like that. But that doesn't make a difference, because Imperial Order is an auto-win button. Those cards that do not let your opponent do a certain type of thing should not exist at all. I do not know what Konami was thinking when they brought back Imperial Order, and for a time it was okay, but because of the reasons I mentioned. But now that we are in a very diverse format, this card has to go once again, because it's a very psychic card. You cannot search it like Scythe or Anaconda with Dagda and Enforcer, but when you draw it, then that means you're going to win the game. So Konami doesn't want stuff like that in the game. So I'm pretty sure Imperial Order's time to go has come, and this is why I have it on the ban section. Now, moving forward to the limited section, this is going to be a very long one because I am trying not to give a slap on the wrist on the top tier decks or even the best tier 2 strategies. I'm just trying to make them completely unplayable. Not unplayable, but very, very bad so that people would not choose to play them. And the problem with what I'm going to do right now is that you're going to expect Sword Soul to be the absolute best deck moving into the next format. And unfortunately, this is what's most likely going to happen because Sword Soul is not getting touched next list. Unless you're playing with Enforcer, and yes, Anaconda might get banned, then you won't be able to do that. But some lists play only the 10E card, they don't play Enforcers, so these lists are going to be completely untouched. So yes, this is going to be a problem because that's what Konami likes to do. So this is not a wish list, this is a prediction and what I think Konami is going to do moving forward. So the first deck we're going to talk about is Tri-Brigade. Now, the first card that I think is going to go to 100% is Tri-Brigade Fractal. This card not only gives you a search, but it gives you 3 monsters in the graveyard to use right away. And now in Lyrilusk, it's even better because you can send Cobalt Sparrow to the graveyard as well, so you can search it, so you can use the effect to search once you special summon it with your Warbler or your Canary. So this card, even though it's not as searchable as before because Tenki went to 1, it still needs to go to 1 because it's a very powerful enabler. Now, I don't think this is enough. Yes, cards like Revolt were considered to be bannable before, but the problem is that people don't even play Revolt anymore if they're playing with Lyrilusk, they're playing Oath, so that scenario goes out the window as well. So I think the card that should join Fractal in the limited section is Tri-Brigade Nerval. And the reason being is because of Lyrilusk mainly. This card is a level 1 wing beast, and on its own, it's not that bad. In its own deck, it's a decent card, and you would never consider it to be limit worthy. But with Lyrilusk, when you special summon this, when you search it with your Cobalt Sparrow, you special summon this with your Sapphire Swallow from your hand. You use its effect to summon a link from your extra deck. You overlay to summon a monster that's good, that either gives you a search or disruption, and when you detach it, it also gives you a search. Count how many stuff I put in this with just one card. Is this considered fair to you? Because I don't think it is. In Lyrilusk decks, Nerval is more broken than Fractal, so I think it should join Fractal in the limited section just to limit it consistently. It's still going to be searchable with a lot of cards like Cobalt Sparrow, but you're just not going to hard draw it, and once you lose this one copy, you're not going to be able to use it again. So this is why this hit also hits Lyrilusk Tri-Brigade, but also pure Tri-Brigade, because cards like Shurei could be considered to be limit worthy, bannable, Tri-Brigade Revolt, like I said, but I think the Lyrilusk deck changed the dynamic of Tri-Brigades, so you have to consider more stuff than just the pure version right now in order to make an effective ban list that would hit both versions. So this is why I have these two cards here in the limited section, and I think if these two go to 1, the pure Tri-Brigade deck might be dead. The Lyrilusk version will still be playable, but not as dominant as it is right now. Now, next up, let's talk about Drytron. Drytron, first of all, is a deck that it's very hard to hit directly. We've seen it that 3 cards have become collateral damage for Drytron so far, that being the banning of Union Carrier, the limiting of Benten, and the limiting of Eva. And my problem with such a strategy from Konami is that if you keep doing this, you hurt too many other decks instead of just hitting directly the problematic deck. And this is why here I'm going to hit Drytron cards instead of saying something like banning Benten or banning Eva, which I'm sure other people are going to talk about, but I don't think it's the correct move. This doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to happen because it's Konami, they don't give a damn about hitting other decks when they're trying to hit the problematic deck, but I think it's very easy to hit Drytron directly. So the first card that should go to 1 is Drytron Alpha. This card, just searching you the monsters, is the most powerful Drytron monster, and the big thing is that if you summon this with Nova and then you link it away, if your opponent DD cross this and you only have 1 copy, then you're pretty much screwed. You can't do anything. You cannot search your monsters. Unless you have hard drawn the ultimateness or something like that, you won't be able to play. So this is why Alpha, I think, going to 1 is a very big hit to the deck, but it's not enough. So I also have Drytron Nova going with it as well. Now, Nova is a searchable card, and the problem is that people play 3 Nova and only 1 copy of the field spell to kind of play around Droll because they don't have too many searches. If this card went to 1, you could still technically have the same amount of copies in your deck if you were just playing 3 copies of Fafnir and 1 copy of Nova, but you would be more susceptible to Droll, and this is what I'm trying to do here. I'm just trying to give more counterplay for a deck like this. And because Droll has become a better card because of the Lyrilusk strategy, because it searches a lot, having it in the main deck even when you're playing against Drytrons would actually hurt the deck, and if you have to hit the deck as something like this, then you would make the deck lose to Droll even harder than it does now. So this is why I think this deck is not the best deck right now, but the problem is that if you start hitting the best decks, then people would just resort to stuff that are not best decks right now, but they used to be better, or they're just tier 2 strategies. And this is why Drytron is here, because if you hit Tri-Brigades, if you hit all that stuff, people are going to play Drytron, so I think you have check decks like this as well. And with those two limits, you can avoid stuff like banning Benten and killing other decks like Cyber Angels or Herald of Perfection type decks, and you would also make the deck weaker as well. Now, next up we have Invoke Dogmatica Shuttle, another deck that I think is not as broken as people think. In the beginning of every format, they think that it's going to be the absolute tier 1 best deck, but it's never going to happen. But still, the deck is really good and a lot of people play it, so I think we have to check this as well, especially the Invoked engine, because come on, don't tell me that you are not bored of Invoked by now. I mean, we've been seeing it constantly for so many years. It has never been a bad strategy. So yeah, first of all, we have Nadir Servant. This card, not just for this deck. Dogmaticas can be splashed in pretty much anything, and you cannot argue about that. So I think that this engine has had its time, and even with one Nadir, people are still going to play it. You can play one Nadir with 3 Ecclesia, because right now people are playing 3 Nadir with 1 Ecclesia. Technically, the consistency of starters is the same when you do that. It's just not as powerful, because just Ecclesia searches you either your Fleur or your Punishment, but this card searches you both with Titaniclad, and you can do also other stuff with Schism, which makes Winda seem like an unfair card, which it truly isn't. The only reason Winda seems problematic is because of this engine, otherwise you would just see it in Shadows. So this Y Nadir should go to 1. It's an unsearchable card, so at 1 it's fine, you can just sack it whenever you want. So if you draw it, you're a really good player and you should deserve to win, but yeah, I don't think that this card should be a 3. It's very similar to Engage in my opinion, maybe even more generic than Engage if you think about it, so this is why this card should go to 1. But with that, Magical Meltdown needs to go to 1 at last. Come on. I mean, how many Banlist has this card dodged? And this is the only hit that makes sense, because you can kinda limit Alistair, but that wouldn't really make sense, because this card is not only giving you access to Alistair, but also making your opponent unable to interact with your invocation and the summon of your fusion monsters. I think it's the most broken part about this card, which makes it really bad for the game, because it just makes your opponent not being able to do much when you fusion summon. And it's not just the invoked monsters, you're not able to activate anything in response to negate a Shadow Fusion's activation, or when your opponent summons a construct, all the shadows are going to resolve because you cannot summon any, because you cannot activate anything when your opponent summons a fusion monster. So yeah, this card should go to 1 as well. It's another unsearchable. Technically it is with Terraforming, but you have 2 copies instead of 4, so moving this to 1 would make the deck less consistent and less resilient as well. So yeah, these 2 cards going to 1. I think the deck is still going to be playable if you're a fan of it. I'm not trying to kill any deck here, I'm just trying to make them weaker, to make Konami be able to promote new product without having to make a deck so broken that would actually power creep these decks without needing them to get. Now, the next deck is Prank Kids, and the Prank Kids, I hear, is a preemptive hit. And I know that the deck is not being played that much right now with a limit of Meowmu, but when the Brave Token engine comes out, you're going to see this deck way too much more. So I think Doodle should go to 1, and this is the best thing that I can think of hitting the deck. This is a very difficult deck to hit, because the main deck stuff all kind of serve the same purpose. So it's not like hitting a main deck card would make sense. So this card, since it's being played as a 3-off, it's basically the same dynamic as Meow. You either have to put it back in the extra deck every single time with pranks, otherwise you're not going to have as strong as a follow-up. And with a Brave Token engine, the deck is going to become very resilient to cards like Nibiru and pretty much any hand trap, so I think it's going to become a problem eventually, even though it's not right now, and especially if better decks get hit, people are going to resort to this deck. So I think Doodle should go to 1, and you're going to have a chance to play it at the YCS with the Brave Token engine and 3 Doodle, which you're going to see then. I'm pretty sure the deck is going to see a lot of representation. Depends on how expensive the Brave Token is going to be, because when an engine that is being hyped by the OCG for such a long time, and we already know that it's going to be good, it's coming out before a major event, you can expect the prices to be very spiky. You're going to see cards hit like $70 or $80, and yes, the deck is going to be expensive, but that doesn't stop Yu-Gi-Oh players from buying stuff, so you're going to see it, and you're going to see why Prank Kids with this engine is going to become a problem, and hopefully we'll see it for only these events. Now, the last deck that we have here, I think it's the deck that most people are going to get a little bit upset about me hitting in this list, and it's because I think a lot of people just like this deck. And I'm talking about Dragon League. Now, if you think about Dragon League right now, you would not think it's hit worthy. I agree. The deck does not see nearly as much play as before because LP got banned. The problem is, once again, I've mentioned this 1,000 times in the video, I'm gonna keep mentioning it again because I know that there'll be some people down there that was going to say in the comments that some decks do not see play right now. Yes, they do not see play right now, but if you leave them untouched and you hit everything else, they are going to become the best deck, and that's what Konami does not want. They don't want you to make an old deck the best deck of the new format. They want new decks to become the best decks of the new format. And this is why they're going to hit decks that you would not even consider being hit worthy right now. Just like they did back in the 2019 ban list when they butchered the internal format and a lot of other decks got down as well, but they were not even that power 4. Now, the first card for Dragon Link, I think Quick Launch should go to 1. There are some scenarios where cards like this are just too broken. Bad card design is a thing in Yu-Gi-Oh! And this is one example. This card is not even a once per turn. It's a quick play, and it also gives you a monster that you can be used either for a 1-card Savage Dragon, which is already bad enough, but people started playing the Rocket Synchron, and with the Chaos Ruler combo, you can go for Abyss as well. So how does this card even become a fair card in the game without hitting it? It's absolutely impossible. There are substitutes for this if you want to play more extenders. You can play the Armed Dragon Flash, but this card is once per turn, and it doesn't give you a monster that does as much as Rocket Tracer. Basically, the monster you get is just Link material and nothing more, which is fine, but this card is absolutely not fine. This card just gives you so much with one card. And the next card I'm going to mention is basically the same issue. Chaos Space should go to 1. Now, Chaos Space arguably is even more powerful than Quick Launch, because although it is a once per turn effect, the amount of cards you can get, if you just do a 1-card combo with Chaos Space and you discard anything, and you search one of the baby Chaos Dragons and you do the combo, you can get so much. And it can also search cards like Levianir, if you already have one of the Chaos Dragons, and it can also shuffle back one of your monsters. So if that wasn't enough, the limiting of Striker Dragon sometimes is meaningless because of this card, because you can just put your Striker Dragon back in the extra deck, draw a card, but it also makes the limiting of your Chaos Dragon sometimes meaningless because you search the second one again because you put it back into the deck Chaos Space. So it just mitigates the amount of damage the ban listed before. So yeah, this card is not fair at all, because these two cards combined, when you have them both, then your hands become really good. And even with those cards being at 1, Dragon decks would still be good. None of the decks I mentioned right now is dead. Any kind of deck you want to play that you're still playing right now would be playable if that's what your problem is. This is why I mentioned that I'm not a big fan of banning cards, because when Konami banned something like Colossus, then they made a deck really bad, close to unplayable. Same with Engage, and same with all the other cards, and same with Hub Horror, but maybe not to that level. I'm not doing that right now, but Konami might, which is something that you should be prepared for, because this doesn't mean that Konami is not a big fan of the ban section like I'm not, so they might do more cruel stuff than what I'm mentioning right now. So yeah, all these hits, they're just going to make sure that the new decks are going to become the best decks, because Sword Soul is never going to get touched this ban list. This is absolutely not going to happen 100%. So it's going to make the format worse in a sense, but more fresh. So I don't know which one we prefer most, because even when we're in a good format, where we're in that format for too long, we just get bored even though it is a good format. So I think Konami has to try to refresh the game eventually, and I don't see a better opportunity for them to do it than this ban list, which marks the beginning of major events once again, which is basically a new era for you. Now, I don't have anything in the semi-limited section, and for the unlimited section, this stuff are going to happen 100%, because any card that goes from 1 to 2 is going to 3 next ban list, unless this card is called Destiny Hero Malicious. So for the unlimited section, we have Skullcrobat Joker, doesn't make a difference, it's just going to make Pendulum deck better. Danger Nessie, it's not Jackalope or Tsuchinoko, so Cherubini access does not do anything here, so this is why Nessie is the only one that can come off the list. Jackalope and Tsutsi, as long as Cherubini is legal, then these cards should stay at 1 forever. And the last card is Emergency Teleport. This card is going to help a few decks, and you're going to see that I did not include Virtual World in this particular list, but I think that Virtual World is a deck that it's kind of weird. It's kind of like Drytron, but not as good. And the problem with Virtual World is that it's just not as consistent as Drytron is, and it doesn't have the tools to do a lot of stuff, and the end board that it makes are not as formidable as Drytron. So this is why I think Virtual World is going to become the top tier 2 strategy next format, and it's also a Worm deck, so you can kind of combine with Sword Soul if you're feeling innovative, which is something that we might try here if you're interested to seeing that we make this deck. Comment down below if you want to see that. So yeah, that's another strategy that you can try, and yeah, I think Virtual World, it might get hit again sometime in the future, but I don't think this is the time, because decks like Dragon Link are considered way more powerful than Virtual World in my opinion, so this is why this ban list is like that. But who knows, maybe Konami feels like butchering pretty much everything and they're going to hit Lulu as 1-1, maybe that's a possibility, but I don't think it's going to happen. So yep, that's the list guys. I know that there are going to be a lot of comments saying how I have no idea what I'm talking about, and I welcome them, because I want you guys to tell me what you think is going to happen. If you think that Konami is not going to do anything again and make it a very short, very small list that is not going to change the format whatsoever like last time, or if you think that they're going to make a big list but with completely different cards of what I hit. So both scenarios are possible. I want to hear what you guys have to say about this list, because I think we're at the point where the game has to get a reset, otherwise we're going to end in another eternal format that we've been seeing the same decks for just too long for the game's liking. So yep, that's the video guys. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss upcoming content, and we'll see you you next time.